I stood there on my front porch, coffee mug warming my hands, staring out at the little patch of earth I'd turned into something beautiful over the past few years. My garden was my pride, my quiet corner of the world after everything fell apart with Clarissa. The divorce had been messy, years of arguments, tears, and her walking out the door with half my life in her suitcase. But I'd found peace here in this sleepy Illinois suburb, just me and my flowers. Roses, tulips, daisies, all of them growing strong under my care. A little fence I'd built myself, keeping it all safe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That peace lasted right up until the day I saw the moving truck 3 houses down. I didn't think much of it at first, just new neighbors, probably some nice folks looking for a quiet life like me. Then I saw her step out of the passenger side, flipping her hair like she always did when she was trying to look important. Clarissa, my ex-wife. My stomach dropped. She'd moved into my cul-de-sac, like some kind of cruel joke from the universe. Then came Rick. I didn't know his name yet, but I saw him climb out of the driver's seat, a big guy, broad shoulders, buzzed hair, the kind of man who looked like he'd spend his life barking orders. His truck was one of those oversized monsters, all chrome and noise, the kind you'd expect from someone who needed everyone to notice him. I watched them unpack, hoping maybe they'd keep to themselves. But hope's a funny thing. It doesn't last long when reality kicks in. A few days later, I was out watering my roses when I heard that truck roar to life. I glanced up just in time to see Rick peel out of their driveway, cut the corner sharp, and roll right over the edge of my lawn. The tires left deep ruts in the grass, tearing up the green I'd spent months keeping neat. I stood there, hose dripping in my hand, jaw tight. It wasn't the garden yet, just the grass, but it felt like a warning. It happened again the next week. Then the week after that. Each time, he'd swing that truck wide, leaving tire marks like scars across my yard. I'd grit my teeth and fix it, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. But then one Saturday morning, I was kneeling in the dirt, planting some new marigolds, when I heard the rumble. Before I could even stand, Rick's truck came barreling straight through my garden. The front tires crushed my roses, the back ones flattened the tulips. Petals scattered everywhere, stems snapped like bones. I shot to my feet, heart pounding, fist clenched. He didn't even slow down, just kept going, windows down, laughing like it was some big game. I looked over at their house and saw Clarissa on the porch, sipping something from a glass, smirking at me like she used to when she knew she'd won an argument. I couldn't take it anymore. I marched across the street, dirt still on my knees, and stopped at the edge of their driveway. "Hey," I called out, voice shaking with anger. Rick climbed out of his truck, all swagger, wiping his hands on his jeans like he'd just done some real work. Clarissa stayed where she was, watching me with that same smug look. "You mind keeping your truck off my property?" I said, trying to keep it civil. Rick just grinned, showing too many teeth. "What's the big deal, man? It's just some flowers." I felt my blood boil. "It's my garden. I've been working on it for years. You don't get to roll through it like it's nothing." He laughed, a loud, barking sound, and looked over at Clarissa like I was some kind of clown. She finally spoke, her voice dripping with that old familiar venom. "Oh, Marcus, lighten up. Men will be men. Rick's a real man, not like some people." I stood there, staring at her, feeling that old sting. A real man. She'd thrown that at me during the divorce too, like I was less because I didn't strut around breaking things to prove a point. Rick clapped a hand on his truck, still chuckling. "Maybe you should get a tougher hobby, buddy. Flowers? That's cute." I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked back to my house, jaw so tight it hurt. I could hear them laughing behind me, the sound cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. When I got inside, I slammed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. My garden, what was left of it, was a mess. Crushed petals, broken stems, tire tracks slicing through it like a wound. I'd spent years building that little piece of peace, and in one morning, they'd torn it apart. I looked out the window at their house, at that stupid truck parked like it owned the street, and something shifted in me. This wasn't just about flowers anymore. This was personal. They wanted to push me? Fine. I'd push back. Not with yelling or fists. I wasn't Rick. I'd do it my way. I didn't know how yet, but standing there, staring at the wreckage of my sanctuary, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I woke up every Saturday after that with a knot in my gut, waiting for the sound of Rick's truck. It became a routine I hated, me sipping coffee on the porch, pretending everything was fine, while my eyes kept darting to their house 3 doors down. Sure enough, like clockwork, I'd hear that engine rev up, loud and obnoxious, and there he'd go, Rick would peel out of their driveway, swing wide, and tear right through my yard again. The first few times, it was just the grass, but now he'd gotten bolder. He'd aim for the garden itself, tires chewing up what was left of my flowers, leaving mud and broken stems in his wake. I'd stand there, gripping my mug so tight I thought it might crack, watching him roar off down the street like he owned the whole damn neighborhood. And there was Clarissa, every time, perched on their porch with a drink in her hand, watching it all like it was her favorite show. She'd wave at me sometimes, that little smirk on her face, like she was daring me to do something about it. I tried talking to them again. Stupid, I know, but I thought maybe I could reason with him. One afternoon, after he'd flattened my daisies, I walked over, hands shoved in my pockets so I wouldn't do something dumb like swing at him. Rick was leaning against his truck, wiping down the hood like it was a prize horse. Clarissa sat on the steps, swirling ice in her glass. Hey, I started, keeping my voice steady. I'm asking you again, keep that thing off my yard. It's not a racetrack. Rick didn't even look up, just kept polishing. It's just a little fun, man. Relax. Fun. That word hit me like a slap. It's not fun for me, I said. That garden's mine. I put years into it. You're wrecking it for no reason. He finally straightened up, towering over me with that smug grin. It's just dirt and petals, Marcus. Maybe if you had something worth protecting, I'd care. I felt my face heat up, but before I could snap back, Clarissa chimed in. He's asserting his manhood, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You wouldn't get it. Asserting his manhood. I wanted to laugh, but all I could feel was the rage bubbling up inside me. I walked away again that day, their laughter chasing me back to my house. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, they turned it into a joke. I'd patch up the garden as best I could, replant what I could save, smooth out the ruts, but it wasn't the same. The neat rows were gone, the fence was leaning, and every fix felt like a Band-Aid on a broken leg. I started avoiding my own front yard, just so I wouldn't have to see the damage. But I couldn't avoid the sound. Every weekend, that truck. Every weekend, their mocking voices. Rick started yelling stuff when he drove by, nice weeds, buddy, or grow a pair, flower boy. And Clarissa would cackle like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all in my head. It wasn't just the garden anymore. It was the way they looked at me, like I was nothing, like I'd always been nothing to her. Then came the morning that broke me. I'd stayed up late the night before, working on a new section of the garden, trying to bring it back to life. I'd rebuilt the wooden fence by hand, hammering each plank into place, feeling a little bit of pride creep back in. I went to bed tired but hopeful. When I woke up, I shuffled outside with my coffee, expecting to see my work still standing. Instead, I froze. The garden was gone. Not just damaged, destroyed. Every plant was uprooted, stomped flat, or torn out. The fence I'd spent hours on was kicked in, splintered wood scattered everywhere. Deep tire tracks ran through the middle, and I could still smell the exhaust hanging in the air. It looked like a war zone, like some monster had ripped through it just to spite me. I dropped my mug, coffee splashing on my boots, and just stood there, chest tight, hands shaking. I didn't need to guess who did it. I could hear Rick's truck idling down the street, and when I looked up, there he was, leaning out the window with that same stupid grin. Oops, he called out, then gunned the engine and took off. Clarissa was on the porch again, laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at the mess, my mess now. The last thing I had, the one thing I'd held on to after she left me, was gone. It wasn't just dirt and petals to me. It was every quiet morning I'd spent out there, every hour I'd poured into making something good out of the wreckage she'd left behind. And they'd taken it, just because they could. I walked back inside, slammed the door, and sank into a chair, my mind racing. I wasn't going to beg them anymore. I wasn't going to yell or reason or play their game. They thought they could walk all over me, literally, and get away with it. They thought I'd just take it, like I always had with her. But not this time. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but as I sat there, staring at my muddy boots, a fire started burning in me. This wasn't about flowers anymore. This was about them thinking they could break me and laugh while they did it. I wasn't broken yet, and I wasn't going to let them win. I'd find a way to make them regret this. I'd make sure of it. I couldn't sleep that night after they trashed my garden. I kept seeing it every time I closed my eyes. The smashed flowers, the broken fence, the tire tracks cutting through it all like a knife. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with anger and something else, something sharper. I wasn't just going to fix it this time. I wasn't going to let Rick and Clarissa keep laughing at me like I was some pushover they could stomp on whenever they felt like it. By the time the sun came up, I'd made up my mind. I needed a plan, something smart, something that'd hit them where it hurt without me ever throwing a punch. I didn't have Rick's size or Clarissa's venom, but I had my head, and I was going to use it. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Cal Benton's name. If anyone could help me pull this off, it was him. Cal was an old friend from way back, before Clarissa, before the divorce, when life was simpler. He lived out in the sticks now, a farmer with a knack for tinkering. He'd built all kinds of weird stuff over the years, contraptions for his crops, gadgets to scare off crows, even a little robot dog once, just for laughs. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but he owed me a favor from a few summers ago when I'd helped him haul hay after his truck broke down. I dialed his number, pacing my kitchen, the wrecked garden glaring at me through the window. "Marcus Shaw, you old dog," Cal answered, his voice rough and cheerful. "What's got you calling me at the crack of dawn?" I didn't waste time. "I need your help, Cal. My ex-wife's new husband's been tearing up my yard, and I'm done taking it. I want to set something up. Something to stop him cold." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Sounds like a man's crossed a line. Tell me what you're thinking." I laid it out. How Rick kept driving through my garden, how Clarissa egged him on, how they destroyed everything I'd built. Cal listened, grunting now and then, and when I finished, he didn't hesitate. "I've got just the thing," he said. "You ever hear of a perimeter mat? Farmers use 'em to keep cows from wandering. Low voltage won't kill anybody, but it'll make 'em wish they'd stayed home. I've got one I can tweak for you." My ears perked up. "What else you got?" He laughed again. "How about motion sprinklers? Freezing cold water hits 'em the second they step where they shouldn't. And, oh, you'll love this, a motion speaker. I rigged one up with a sound that'll scare the devil himself. Part demon, part hellhound, loud as sin. They'll think the gates of hell opened up." I could feel a grin creeping across my face. "That's perfect, Cal. Can you get it to me quick?" "Give me a day to round it up," he said. "I'll drop it off tomorrow. You owe me a beer after this, though." "Deal," I said, already feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Cal showed up the next afternoon, his beat-up truck rattling into my driveway. He climbed out, wiry and sunburned, hauling a box of gear that clinked and rattled. "Here's your revenge kit," he said, setting it down with a thud. He walked me through it. The mat was a thin, rubbery thing I could bury under a layer of dirt, wired to a little battery pack. The sprinklers were small but tough, easy to hide in the flower beds. And the speaker, he hooked it up to his phone and played the sound for me. It was a deep, guttural roar, like something out of a nightmare, loud enough to wake the whole street. "They'll crap their pants," Cal said, grinning. I nodded, picturing Rick's smug face turning to panic. "Let's hope so." We spent the rest of the day setting it up. I dug shallow trenches along the edge of my yard, laid the mat down, and covered it with soil so it looked like nothing was there. The sprinklers went in next, tucked behind what was left of my plants, aimed right at the path Rick always took. The speaker I hid under the porch, angled so the sound would blast out toward the street. Cal wired it all to motion sensors, step on the mat, and the whole show would start. I added one more thing, my old security cameras. I'd bought them cheap a while back, mostly to watch for package thieves, but now they'd be my eyes. I mounted one on the porch, another by the garage, both aimed at the yard. If Rick tried anything, I'd have proof. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, and my little house looked normal again, except now it was a trap, waiting to spring. Cal clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a patient man, Marcus, but even patient men got limits. This'll teach him." I thanked him, handed him a cold beer from the fridge, and sent him on his way. Then I went inside, grabbed a fresh mug of coffee, and settled into a chair by the window. It was dark out, the street quiet, but I wasn't going to bed. I wanted to be awake when Rick made his next move. I knew he'd come. Weekends were his time to shine, and he wouldn't be able to resist tearing through my yard again, especially after wrecking it so bad. I sat there, sipping my coffee, the bitterness matching the fire in my chest. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, had me on edge. I kept imagining it. His truck rolling up, the tires hitting the mat, the chaos that'd follow. I wasn't a violent guy, never had been. But this wasn't about violence. This was about taking back what was mine, about showing them I wasn't the weak little man they thought I was. My garden was gone, sure, but my pride wasn't. I glanced at the cameras on my phone, their little green lights blinking in the dark. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait. And as the night stretched on, that wait turned into something satisfying, like the calm before a storm you know is coming. They'd pushed me too far, and now they were going to find out what happens when I push back. I'd been sitting by the window for hours, the coffee in my mug long gone cold, when I finally saw it. Headlights cutting through the dark. It was 2 a.m., the street dead quiet except for the low growl of Rick's truck creeping closer. My heart started pounding, not out of fear, but something else. Anticipation, maybe even excitement. I'd spent all day setting up my trap with Cal, and now it was time to see if it worked. I leaned forward, peering through the blinds, watching that oversized beast of a vehicle roll down the cul-de-sac. Rick didn't even try to be subtle. He swung wide, just like always, aiming straight for my yard. I held my breath as the front tires crossed the line, hitting the spot where I'd buried the mat. Then it happened, zap. A sharp crackle split the air, faint but unmistakable, and the truck jerked like it had hit a wall. Rick's voice cut through the night, a high-pitched yelp that didn't match his big man swagger at all. Before he could figure out what was going on, the sprinklers kicked in. I'd aimed them just right, and now they blasted freezing water straight at his truck, spraying through the open windows. I could hear him cursing, loud and frantic, as the cold hit him. The demon roar came next. Cal's speaker let loose that ungodly sound, a deep, guttural howl that echoed off the houses like some monster had clawed its way out of hell. It was louder than I'd expected, rattling my windows, and I saw Rick's truck swerve hard, tires spinning in the wet dirt. He was yelling something I couldn't make out, probably swearing up a storm, and I couldn't help it. I grinned. The chaos was beautiful. Mud flew everywhere as he tried to peel out, the truck fishtailing like a panicked animal. Then I saw movement at their house. Clarissa came stumbling out onto the porch, wrapped in a robe, her hair a mess. She must have heard the noise and figured Rick needed her. She took 2 steps off the porch, barefoot, and hit the mat herself, a zap. She screamed, a wild, shrieking sound, hopping around like she'd stepped on a live wire. "Rick, what the hell is this?" she hollered, her voice cracking as the sprinklers caught her too, soaking her from head to toe. I couldn't stay inside anymore. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my boots, and stepped out onto the porch, keeping my face calm like I'd just woken up to check on the commotion. The scene in front of me was better than I'd dreamed. Rick was half out of his truck, one leg stuck in the mud, water dripping off his buzzed head, his shirt plastered to his chest. Clarissa was a soggy mess, clutching her robe, shivering and glaring at everything like the world had personally betrayed her. The roar had stopped, the speaker was on a timer, but the sprinklers kept going, spitting icy water in little bursts. I crossed my arms and leaned against the railing, letting the silence settle for a second before I spoke. "Problems?" I said, keeping my voice even, like I was just a concerned neighbor. Rick whipped his head around, his face red and furious, but he didn't say anything right away. He was too busy trying to yank his boot out of the muck. Clarissa, though, she didn't miss a beat. She stormed toward me, slipping a little on the wet grass, pointing a dripping finger in my face. "What did you do, Marcus? This is insane. We're calling the police." I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for that threat, and I was ready. "Please do," I said, meeting her eyes. "I've got security footage of you two destroying my property for weeks. Cops might like to see it." That stopped her cold. Her mouth opened, then shut, and I could see the gears turning behind those angry eyes. Rick finally got free of the mud and stomped over, his fists balled up like he wanted to take a swing. "You think you're smart, huh?" he growled, water still trickling down his neck. "Setting up some little booby trap? You're pathetic." I shrugged, not moving an inch. "I think it's pretty smart, actually. Key. You should try staying on your own side of the street next time." He took a step closer, chest puffed out, but Clarissa grabbed his arm. "Rick, don't," she hissed, her voice low but sharp. "He's not worth it." She was dripping wet, her robe clinging to her, and for once, she didn't look so smug. They stood there, glaring at me, and I just stared back, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. The cameras were rolling, the trap had worked, and for the first time since they'd moved in, I wasn't the one on the defensive. Rick muttered something under his breath, probably a curse, and turned back to his truck, kicking at the mud like it had personally offended him. Clarissa gave me one last venomous look before she followed, her slippers squishing with every step. "This isn't over," she called over her shoulder, but it sounded hollow, like she wasn't so sure anymore. I watched them go, the truck limping back to their driveway, leaving a trail of water and defeat. I stayed on the porch a while longer, letting the night air cool me down, the sprinklers finally clicking off behind me. The yard was a mess again, mud and tire marks, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about the garden tonight. This was about showing them I wasn't going to roll over anymore. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled up the camera footage on my phone. There it was, clear as day, Rick driving in, the mat zapping him, the sprinklers soaking him, Clarissa's little dance when she hit the trap too. I saved it all, every second, and leaned back in my chair. They could call the cops if they wanted. I'd love to see them try to explain this. For now, though, I'd won. Not the war, maybe, but this battle? This one was mine. I set the phone down, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat there in the quiet, savoring the taste of it. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was this fight, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was the one holding the cards. Let them come at me again. I'd be ready. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in weeks, the memory of Rick and Clarissa flailing in my trap still fresh in my mind. I'd slept hard, the kind of sleep you get when you know you've landed a good punch, even if it wasn't with my fists. The sun was just creeping over the rooftops as I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, expecting to see the muddy mess from last night. It was there, sure, tire tracks and puddles, but something else caught my eye. Rick's truck was parked crooked in their driveway, still streaked with dirt, and I could see him through their front window, pacing back and forth like a caged bear. Clarissa was nowhere in sight, probably still fuming in her soggy robe. I smirked into my mug. They'd threatened to call the cops, but the street was quiet, no sirens, no flashing lights. They backed off, at least for now. I didn't have long to enjoy it, though. Around noon, a car pulled up in front of my house. A sleek black sedan, the kind that screams lawyer or bill collector. A guy in a cheap suit stepped out, clipboard in hand, and marched up my walkway. I met him at the door before he could knock. "Marcus Shaw?" he asked, voice flat. "That's me," I said, keeping my tone easy. He handed me a piece of paper, official looking with a bunch of legal gibberish typed across it. "Cease and desist order," he said. "From Richard Dalton. Says you're harassing him with dangerous devices on your property. You've got 24 hours to remove them, or he's filing charges." I took the paper, glancing at the words, trespass, liability, damages. Rick's name was scrawled at the bottom in a big, sloppy signature. I almost laughed. "Thanks," I told the guy, and he nodded, turned, and left without another word. I shut the door and read it over, my good mood souring. Harassment? Dangerous devices? That was rich, coming from the guy who'd been treating my yard like his personal demolition derby. I tossed the letter on the table and grabbed my phone, pulling up the footage from last night. There it was, Rick driving onto my property, the mat zapping him, the sprinklers soaking him. Private land, clear trespassing. If anyone had a case, it was me. I wasn't taking anything down. Let him try to push this. I'd shove it right back in his face. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Rick didn't strike me as the type to let a little zap and some water stop him, and Clarissa was too stubborn to let me have the last word. I figured they'd lick their wounds for a day or two, then come at me again. I was right, just not in the way I expected. It started small that evening. I was out front, cleaning up the mud from the night before, when I noticed something off. A couple of ketchup packets were stuck to one of my garden gnomes, the kind you get from fast food joints, smeared red across its little hat. I frowned, picked them up, and tossed them in the trash, thinking maybe some kid had dropped them. Then, the next morning, I found empty beer cans jammed into what was left of my flower beds, 3 of them, crumpled and stinking of stale booze. I stood there, hands on my hips, staring at them. This wasn't random. Kids don't sneak around planting cans like that. I checked the cameras. Nothing clear, just shadows moving in the dark, too far off to make out a face. My gut told me it was Rick, though. He wasn't dumb enough to drive through again, not after last night. But this was petty enough to be him. It got worse over the next few days. One night, I came home from the hardware store to find garbage scattered across my lawn. Banana peels, coffee grounds, some wrappers, like someone had emptied a trash bag and run off. The next morning, I stepped outside and gagged. Someone had dumped a pile of used cat litter right by my porch steps. The smell hit me like a punch, sour and sharp, and I had to grab a shovel to scoop it into a bag before I could even get to my mailbox. I checked the cameras again. Still nothing solid, just a flicker of movement near the edge of the frame. Whoever it was knew where the blind spots were, and that made my blood run hot. Rick had been watching, figuring out how to dodge my setup. I could picture him snickering about it, Clarissa egging him on with that smirk of hers, thinking they'd found a new way to get under my skin. I wasn't wrong about them brooding, either. Every time I saw Rick outside, he'd glare at me across the street, his jaw tight, his big shoulders hunched like he was holding himself back. Clarissa kept her distance, but I'd catch her on their porch sometimes, staring at my house with those cold eyes, sipping her drink like she was plotting. They weren't yelling anymore, weren't mocking me to my face, but this quiet revenge was worse. It was sneaky, dirty, and it made me feel like my little victory last night hadn't meant a damn thing. I'd humiliated them, sure, but now they were hitting back in ways I couldn't prove. I spent hours cleaning up their messes, scrubbing ketchup off my gnomes, hauling trash to the curb, and every time I did, I felt that fire in my chest flare up again. The cease and desist letter sat on my table, mocking me too. Rick pretending he was the victim while he turned my yard into his dumping ground. I sat down that night with another coffee, staring out at the dark street, my mind racing. The trap had worked once, but it wasn't enough. They'd found a way around it, and I couldn't just sit here taking it. I needed to catch them, really catch them, with something the cameras couldn't miss. Something that'd stick, something they couldn't wiggle out of. I didn't know how yet, but as I watched their house, lights flickering behind their curtains, I knew one thing for sure. The worst was still coming. They weren't done with me, and I wasn't done with them. This was a game now, and I was going to play it better. I was starting to feel like a prisoner in my own house, always on edge, waiting for the next pile of garbage or petty jab from Rick and Clarissa. The cat litter had been the tipping point. Shoveling that stinking mess off my porch made me realize I couldn't just keep cleaning up after them. I needed proof, something solid to shove in their faces and end this once and for all. I'd been checking the cameras every day, but they were too smart, sticking to the shadows, hitting the spots where the lenses couldn't reach. I'd underestimated Rick. He wasn't just a loudmouth with a truck. He was cunning in his own nasty way. I sat there one night, coffee in hand, staring out at the dark street, when I saw it. A flicker of movement near the edge of my yard. Not a car this time, but a figure, quick and quiet, slipping through the shadows. My pulse kicked up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed, squinting at the grainy image. It was him. Rick. I couldn't see his face clear enough to prove it, but I knew that bulky shape, the way he moved like he owned the place. I watched him creep closer, a sack slung over his shoulder, and my stomach twisted. He wasn't just tossing trash this time, he was up to something worse. I stayed still, barely breathing, letting him think I was asleep or gone. He stopped near what was left of my flower beds, knelt down, and started pouring something out of the sack. It wasn't garbage. It was white, grainy, catching the moonlight, salt. A whole damn bag of it, dumped right into the soil. I clenched my fists so hard my knuckles ached. He wasn't just messing with me now, he was poisoning the ground, making sure nothing would ever grow there again. My garden was already wrecked, but this was him spitting on the ashes, trying to kill any chance I had of bringing it back. He worked fast, spreading it thick, then stood up, dusted his hands, and slipped back into the dark toward his house. I sat there, shaking with rage, watching him disappear. He thought he'd gotten away clean. He was wrong. I pulled up the camera footage right away, rewinding to the moment he'd stepped into view. There it was clear as day this time. The camera by the garage had caught him dead on, his face lit up by a streetlight as he'd been over with that sack. Rick Dalton, in all his smug glory, salting my earth like some cartoon villain. I saved the clip, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the thrill of finally having him. This wasn't just petty vandalism anymore. This was deliberate, calculated property damage. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my phone and dialed the local police, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "Yeah, hi. This is Marcus Shaw on Elm Street," I said when the dispatcher picked up. "I've got video of my neighbor trespassing and ruining my property. He just poured salt all over my yard to kill the soil. I need someone out here now." It didn't take long, maybe 20 minutes before I saw the cruiser roll up, lights off, parking quietly in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, a younger guy with a buzz cut and an older woman with a no-nonsense look. I met them at the door, phone in hand. "Thanks for coming," I said, keeping it short. "I've got it all on camera." They followed me inside, and I played the footage, Rick sneaking in, dumping the salt, slinking off. The older cop raised an eyebrow. "That's pretty blatant," she said, jotting something in her notebook. "You know who this is?" "Yeah," I said. "Rick Dalton. Lives 3 houses down. He's been tearing up my yard for weeks with his truck, too. I've got more video if you need it." She nodded. "This'll do for now. Let's go have a word with him." I stayed on my porch, watching as they walked down the street, their flashlights bouncing in the dark. I could see Rick's truck still parked in their driveway, and a light flicked on inside as the cops knocked. The door opened, and there he was, shirtless, looking annoyed until he saw the uniforms. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw his arms start flailing, his voice rising, probably trying to bluster his way out of it. Then the younger cop stepped forward, calm but firm, and Rick's shoulders slumped. Clarissa appeared behind him, her face pale, clutching that damn robe again. She started yelling too, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "This is ridiculous. You're ruining our family over some dirt?" I just stood there, arms crossed, letting it wash over me. The cops didn't flinch. They talked for a few more minutes. Then Rick stepped outside, hands behind his back. I heard the click of handcuffs, and my chest loosened a little. They walked him to the cruiser, his head down, Clarissa shrieking after them like a banshee. The older cop came back to me while the other loaded Rick into the car. "We're taking him in for trespassing and property damage," she said. "That video's solid. You want to press charges?" "Damn right I do," I said, no hesitation. She gave me a small nod, like she'd expected that. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow with the footage. For now, he's spending the night in a cell." I thanked her, and they drove off, Rick's silhouette slumped in the back seat. Clarissa stood on her porch, watching them go, then turned and glared at me, her eyes burning even from that distance. I shrugged, just enough for her to see it. "Should have thought of that before you ruined my garden," I said, loud enough to carry. She didn't answer, just spun around and slammed her door. I went back inside, locked up, and sank into my chair, the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. The yard was a lost cause now, salted and dead, but that didn't matter tonight. I'd caught him. I'd won this round, and they couldn't laugh it off this time. I poured myself a fresh coffee, the steam curling up, and let myself smile. It wasn't over, Clarissa's look told me that much, but for now, I had the upper hand, and it felt good. I woke up the next morning to a quiet street, the kind of stillness that felt almost too good to be true after everything. Rick was gone, hauled off in cuffs the night before, and I figured Clarissa was still reeling from it all. I stepped outside with my coffee, expecting to feel some kind of triumph, but the sight of my yard, the salted soil, the broken fence, dampened it a little. I'd gotten him, sure, but the damage was done. Still, I wasn't about to let that ruin the moment. I sipped my coffee and watched their house, wondering how long it'd take Rick to post bail. Not long, it turned out. By noon, I saw his truck roll back into their driveway, slower than usual, like he was trying not to draw attention. He climbed out, head down, and disappeared inside without a glance my way. Clarissa stepped onto the porch a minute later, pacing like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear her, but her wild gestures told me she was furious, probably yelling at a lawyer or a friend about how unfair it all was. The neighborhood started buzzing after that. I caught Mrs. Henley, the old lady next door, peering over her fence at me while she watered her plants. "Heard the cops were here last night," she said, her voice curious but not pushy. "Yeah," I said, keeping it simple. "Caught him wrecking my yard on camera." She nodded, a little smile tugging at her lips. "Good for you, Marcus. That man's been a menace since he showed up." It wasn't just her. Other neighbors started giving me nods or quick waves when I passed by, like I'd done something they'd all been too polite to try. It felt good, knowing I wasn't alone in this, but it didn't last long. That night, around 3 a.m., I jolted awake to a sharp crackling sound outside. I stumbled to the window, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and saw it, flames licking up from my trash can by the curb, a bright orange glow against the dark. My heart sank. I grabbed my phone and ran out in my boxers and a t-shirt, the cold air biting at me as I snatched the garden hose from the porch. The fire wasn't big, mostly paper and leaves, but the smell of burning plastic hit me hard as I sprayed it down. The can was half melted by the time I got the flames out, a charred mess dripping onto the pavement. I stood there, hose dripping in my hand, breathing fast, the wet grass soaking my bare feet. This wasn't an accident. Someone had lit it, and I didn't need 3 guesses to figure out who. I glanced at their house, dark, quiet, no sign of life, but I knew. Rick might have been licking his wounds, but Clarissa? She was a different kind of mad, the kind that didn't stop. I trudged back inside, soaked and shivering, and pulled up the camera footage. My stomach twisted as I watched a hooded figure, quick and careful, slipping up to the kin with a lighter in hand. The angle was off, the face shadowed, but I recognized her shape, the way she moved. Clarissa. She'd stayed just out of the clear frame, dodging the spots where the cameras could nail her. Smart. Too smart. I sat there, staring at the screen, the anger building slow and steady. She'd gone too far now. Arson wasn't a prank, wasn't petty trash tossing. This was dangerous, and I couldn't let it slide. But the footage wasn't enough, not yet. The cops would call it circumstantial, and she'd wiggle out of it with that smug grin of hers. I needed more, something airtight, but I didn't know how to get it. I spent the next day cleaning up the mess, hauling the ruined kin to the garage, my mind racing. Rick stayed out of sight, probably under orders to lay low after his arrest, but Clarissa was everywhere, pacing her porch, glaring at me whenever I stepped outside, her eyes like daggers. The neighbors kept their distance now, whispering among themselves, and I could feel the tension creeping up the street. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I started double-checking the cameras every night, tweaking their angles, hoping to catch her if she tried again. I even set the sprinklers back up, just in case Rick got bold, but it was Clarissa I was worried about now. She was unhinged, wilder than I'd ever seen her, even during the divorce. I'd humiliated her precious Rick, and she wasn't going to let that go. I barely slept, jumping at every sound, my coffee going cold as I sat by the window, watching, waiting. I was ready for a long game. She'd slip up eventually, and I'd be there when she did. But then, out of nowhere, help came knocking. It was late afternoon, the sun dipping low, when I heard a tap on my door. I opened it to find Brielle Knox, the teenage girl from 2 houses over, standing there with her hands in her pockets. She was a quiet kid, always fiddling with that drone of hers, and I'd never talked to her much beyond a wave hello. "Hey, Mr. Shaw," she said, shifting her weight. I saw what happened with your trash can, and I know who did it." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "I've got drone footage." Caught her lighting it. "Clarissa. She egged my dog's crate last week, and I've been watching her ever since. I'm done with her crap." My jaw dropped. "You've got video?" She nodded, pulling out her phone. Clear as day. "Want it?" I grinned, wider than I had in weeks. "Brielle, you just became my favorite neighbor." She smirked a little, and I knew right then, this was the break I'd been waiting for. Clarissa was done. I stood there on my porch, still reeling from Brielle's visit, my mind buzzing with what she'd just handed me. She'd show me the drone footage on her phone, grainy at first, but then it zoomed in, clear as daylight. There was Clarissa, sneaking out of her house in that hoodie, lighter flickering in her hand as she bent over my trash can. The flames caught quick, and she darted back, glancing around like a nervous cat before disappearing into the shadows. Brielle had caught every second, her drone hovering silent above the street. "I figured you'd want this," she'd said, her voice sharp with her own grudge. "She's been a jerk to everyone, not just you." I'd nodded, barely able to speak, and she'd sent me the file right then and there. "Thanks, Brielle," I'd managed, and she'd shrugged like it was nothing, heading back home with her hands in her pockets. But it wasn't nothing, it was everything. I went inside, locked the door, and pulled up the video on my laptop, watching it again, then again. My hands were steady now, no more shaking, just a calm certainty settling in. This wasn't like the camera footage of Rick, blurry and arguable. This was her face, her movements, undeniable. Arson. She'd crossed a line she couldn't walk back from, and I had her dead to rights. I burned the video to a USB drive, grabbed my jacket, and headed to the police station that afternoon. The same older cop from Rick's arrest was there, her badge reading Officer Grant. She looked up from her desk as I walked in, raising an eyebrow. "Back already, Mr. Shaw?" she said, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah," I said, holding up the drive. "Got something new. Clarissa Dalton this time. She set my trash can on fire the other night, caught it all on video." She took the drive, plugged it into her computer, and watched the footage in silence. I stood there, arms crossed, feeling the weight lift off me with every second she stared at the screen. When it finished, she let out a low whistle. "That's her, all right," she said, scribbling something on a notepad. "Where'd you get this?" "Neighbor kid with a drone," I said. "She's got her own beef with Clarissa." "Lucky for me." Grant nodded, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Lucky indeed. This is solid. We'll pick her up today." I felt a rush of relief, like I could finally breathe again. Thanks, I said, and she waved me off. Just doing the job. You pressing charges on this one too? You bet, I said, no hesitation. She gave me a look, half respect, half amusement, and told me to head home. They'd handle it. I was back on my porch by late afternoon, coffee in hand, when the cruiser rolled up to their house. I watched from a distance, keeping it casual, like I was just enjoying the day. 2 officers, Grant and the younger guy from before, knocked on the door. Clarissa answered, still in that robe, her hair a mess. I couldn't hear the words, but her arms started flailing, her voice rising sharp and loud. This is insane. You can't do this, she shouted, loud enough for me to catch it. Grant stayed calm, saying something I couldn't make out, and then the younger cop stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Clarissa froze, her mouth open, then tried to back inside. They didn't let her. Grant grabbed her arm, gentle but firm, and turned her around. The cuffs clicked, and she started yelling again, a string of curses and pleas that echoed down the street. Rick came barreling out then, his face red, fist clenched. What the hell's going on? He roared, stomping toward the cops. I tensed, expecting a fight, but the younger officer moved fast, blocking Rick's path. Step back, sir, he said, voice hard. Rick didn't listen. He swung an arm, not at the cop but toward me, pointing across the street. This is you, isn't it, you little bastard? He bellowed. I didn't move, just sipped my coffee, meeting his glare. The cop grabbed him, twisting his arm back, and Rick stumbled, swearing as they held him in place. Clarissa was still shrieking, her voice cracking now, as they walked her to the cruiser. He's lying. It's all lies, she cried, but it sounded weak, desperate. The neighbors were out now, Mrs. Henley on her lawn, a couple others peeking through windows, and I could feel their eyes on them. Grant shoved Clarissa into the back seat, slamming the door, while the younger cop kept Rick pinned until he stopped thrashing. Stay here, he told Rick, then joined Grant in the car. They drove off, Clarissa's muffled yells fading into the distance, leaving Rick standing there, panting, staring at me like he could burn my house down with his eyes. I set my mug down and walked to the edge of my porch, hands in my pockets. Rick took a step toward me, his fists balled up again, but he stopped short, maybe remembering the cops weren't far. You're dead for this, he growled, low and mean. Maybe, I said, shrugging. But she lit the fire, not me. You should have kept her on a leash. His face twisted, and for a second, I thought he'd charge anyway, but he just spat on the ground and stormed back inside, slamming his door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there a minute longer, the street quiet again, the weight of it all sinking in. Clarissa was gone, arrested, locked up, and Rick was stuck, helpless for once. I'd done it. Not just a zap or a scare this time. I'd hit them where it hurt. I went back inside, locked up, and sank into my chair, the adrenaline fading into something calmer. The garden was still a wreck, the trash can a melted lump, but none of that mattered right now. I'd taken back control, piece by piece, and they couldn't laugh it off anymore. The fight wasn't over, Rick's glare told me that. But tonight, I'd won. And that was enough. I woke up the next morning to a street that felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. Clarissa was gone, locked up on arson charges, and Rick was stuck licking his wounds. I stepped outside with my coffee, expecting to feel some kind of victory, but it was bittersweet. The salted soil stared back at me, a dead patch where my garden used to be, and I couldn't shake the weight of it all. I'd won a battle, sure, but the war had left scars I couldn't ignore. I sipped my coffee and watched their house, the curtains drawn tight, no sign of life. Rick's truck sat in the driveway, still streaked with mud from that night I'd zapped him, and I wondered how long he'd stay quiet. Not long. I figured he wasn't the type to let this go, not with Clarissa behind bars because of me. The neighborhood had shifted too. Mrs. Henley waved at me from her yard, a little more warmth in it than usual, and I caught a few other neighbors glancing my way, some with nods, some with quick looks before turning away. Word had spread fast. Rick's arrest, Clarissa's meltdown, the whole messy saga. I wasn't sure if they saw me as a hero or just the guy who'd stirred up trouble, but it didn't matter. They weren't glaring at me like I was the problem anymore, and that was something. I spent the day keeping busy, cleaning up the last of the trash can mess, tweaking the cameras just in case, but my mind kept drifting back to Clarissa in that cell, Rick stewing across the street. She'd be out eventually, on bail or probation, and then what? I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. Weeks passed, slow and tense. Clarissa came back one afternoon, a cab dropping her off in front of their house. I watched from my window as she climbed out, her face hard and cold, no robe this time. Just jeans and a jacket, her hair pulled back tight. She didn't look my way, just marched inside, and the door slammed behind her. Rick stepped out a minute later, head down, and I saw the sheriff's deputy parked nearby, probably enforcing the restraining order I'd filed after the fire. He couldn't come near my place now, not legally, and that gave me a little breathing room. But the silence from their house wasn't peace. It was a storm brewing, and I could feel it in my bones. They didn't go out much after that. No porch drinks, no loud truck revving, just a cold, bitter quiet that hung over the cul-de-sac like a fog. Then one night, it broke. I was out front, checking the mail under the streetlights, when I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. I turned, and there was Rick, stomping across the street, his face twisted with something dark. My stomach tightened, but I stood my ground, hands in my pockets, keeping it casual. He stopped a few feet away, just outside the line the restraining order set, his fists clenched so tight I could see the veins popping. "You happy now?" he growled, his voice low and rough. "You destroyed us, you smug little prick." I looked at him, his buzzed hair glinting under the light, his eyes wild, and I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe, but not enough to soften me. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, keeping my tone even. "You two did that yourselves. Driving through my yard, salting my garden, setting fires, that's on you." He took a step closer, testing the line, and I tensed, ready to call the cops if he crossed it. "You think you're so smart," he spat. "Putting her in jail, ruining everything. We're the laughingstock of this damn street because of you." I shrugged, not taking my eyes off him. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you trashed my life." "I didn't start this, Rick." He opened his mouth, probably to yell, but then something stopped him, a voice, sharp and young, cutting through the dark. "Leave him alone." I turned, surprised, and saw Aiden, Clarissa's 14-year-old son from her first marriage, stepping out from their driveway. I hadn't seen much of him since they moved in, just a quiet kid who kept to himself, usually glued to his phone or kicking a ball in their backyard. He marched up, his skinny frame tense, his face flushed. Rick spun on him, furious. "Get back inside, kid," he snapped. But Aiden didn't budge. "No," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "You told her to do it. Mom said it was your idea, the fire, all of it. I'm done with this." I stood there, stunned, as Rick's face went slack, like the air had been punched out of him. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, but Aiden didn't back down. "She told me last night. You pushed her to mess with him, to get back at him." "I heard you." Rick took a step toward him, hand raised like he might grab him, but Aiden flinched away, turning to me instead. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought it was just a joke at first, the truck stuff, but it wasn't. I didn't know it'd get this bad." I didn't know what to say, my throat felt tight, caught off guard by this kid standing there, spilling it all. "It's okay, Aiden," I managed. "Takes a lot to say that." He nodded, quick and jerky, then turned and walked back to the house, leaving Rick standing there, frozen. Rick didn't move for a long moment, his fists unclenching, his shoulders slumping. He looked at me, something broken in his eyes, then muttered, "This ain't over," and trudged back across the street. But it didn't feel like a threat this time, it felt like a man who'd run out of fight. I watched him go, the door slamming behind him, and stood there in the quiet, processing it all. Aiden's words echoed in my head. Rick had pushed her, and now their own kid had turned on them. Their reputation was shot, their family cracking, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger this time. I went back inside, locked up, and sat down with my coffee, the night settling around me. It wasn't joy I felt, not exactly. It was something closer to relief, mixed with a strange ache I couldn't name. They were breaking, and I'd helped make it happen. That was enough for now. I woke up to a morning that felt lighter than any I could remember since Clarissa and Rick moved in. The sun was out, casting long shadows across the street, and their house sat quiet, no truck rumbling, no porch pacing, just stillness. I stepped outside with my coffee, the air crisp with that early fall bite, and looked at my yard. The salted patch was still there, an ugly scar where my garden used to bloom, but it didn't sting as much today. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine, Mrs. Henley's whispers mostly, that Clarissa and Rick were packing up. The for sale sign went up a week after Aiden's blow-up, and by the end of summer, they were gone. No big goodbye, no last stand, Just a moving truck one night and an empty house the next morning. I stood there, sipping my coffee, staring at the blank windows across the street, and felt something settle in me. Not triumph, exactly, but a kind of peace I hadn't had in months. The days after that stretched into weeks, then months, and the cul-de-sac started to heal. The neighbors came out more. Mrs. Henley puttered in her yard. Brielle flew her drone around. Even the quiet couple down the block started planting flowers of their own. My yard stayed bare for a while, the salt keeping anything from growing, but I wasn't in a rush. I'd sit on my porch every evening, coffee in hand, watching the street settle into something normal again. I didn't hear much about Clarissa and Rick after they left. Just rumors they'd moved to some apartment across town, still fighting, still bitter. I didn't care enough to dig deeper. They were out of my life, and that was all that mattered. But then, one crisp fall morning, I heard a knock on my door, soft but insistent. I set my mug down, curious, and opened it to find Aiden standing there, a small potted plant in his hands. He looked different, taller maybe, or just less hunched, his dark hair messy under a baseball cap. "Hey, Mr. Shaw," he said, shifting his weight, his voice quiet but steady. "I brought this. For your garden." I blinked, caught off guard, and took the pot. A little marigold, its yellow blooms bright against the green. "Thanks," I said, setting it on the porch railing. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged, kicking at the step with his sneaker. "I wanted to. We're better now. Different place. Mom's still mad, but she's not. I don't know, crazy like before. I just didn't want you to think we were all like that." I looked at him, this kid who'd stood up to Rick that night, and felt a warmth I hadn't expected. "Takes a lot to say that, Aiden," I said, meaning it. "I appreciate it." He nodded, quick and awkward, then mumbled a goodbye and headed off, his hands shoved in his pockets as he disappeared down the street. I stood there a minute, holding that little plant, and something clicked. I'd spent months fighting, setting traps, chasing proof. Hell, I'd turned my yard into a battlefield just to make them stop. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about moving on. I took the marigold inside, grabbed a shovel, and went to work. The salted spot was still dead, but I dug around it, clearing a new patch near the porch where the soil was clean. I planted Aiden's gift there, patting the dirt down, feeling the earth under my hands again. It wasn't much, just one plant, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I added more. Daisies, tulips, even a couple rose bushes I picked up cheap at the hardware store. The neighbors noticed. Mrs. Henley brought me some cuttings from her yard, and Brielle started swinging by with her dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, to check my progress. "Looks good, Mr. Shaw," she'd say, her drone buzzing overhead, and I'd nod, wiping sweat off my brow. The garden came back slow, piece by piece, and with it, the street felt alive again. I'd sit out there every evening, coffee steaming in the cool air, watching the flowers catch the last light of day. The tire tracks faded, the broken fence got rebuilt, stronger this time, and that salted patch started to soften, grass creeping in where nothing used to grow. It wasn't the same as before, couldn't be, not after everything, but it was mine again, and that was enough. Brielle became a regular visitor, her dog flopping in my yard while she told me about school or her latest drone tricks. "Caught a raccoon on video last night," she'd say, grinning, and I'd laugh, feeling lighter than I had in years. Mrs. Henley started calling me over for tea sometimes, and I'd go, listening to her ramble about her grandkids, the quiet settling into something comfortable. One night, as the leaves turned gold and red, I sat on my porch, mug warm in my hands, looking out at the garden. It wasn't perfect, some plants were scraggly, others still small, but it was growing, steady and sure. I thought about Clarissa and Rick, about the chaos they'd brought, the nights I'd spent angry and sleepless. I'd fought hard to make it stop, and I'd won. Not with fists or yelling, but with patience, with proof, with people like Brielle and Aiden stepping up when I least expected it. I didn't hate them anymore. Didn't need to. They were gone, and I was still here, my little house quiet, my lawn untouched. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness familiar and good, and let out a long breath. The fight was over, and the flowers were back. Sometimes, I realized, it's not about revenge, it's just about taking back what's yours and letting the rest go. I sent my birthday invites first. 2 weeks later, my brother announced his barbecue party, on the same day. Not a single person from my family came to my birthday, not even my wife and daughter. As I cut the cake, my wife texted, "Call me. Urgent." I looked at the message and smiled. 52 missed calls. You know what's funny about planning your own birthday? You start with this ridiculous optimism, like some kind of delusional Hallmark card come to life. There I was, 3 weeks out, scrolling through restaurant websites like I was planning the damn Academy Awards. I had it all mapped out in my head. The perfect evening at Marcello's, this cozy little Italian joint downtown where the breadsticks are warm and the wine doesn't cost more than my mortgage payment. Simple, but meaningful, right? That's what I kept telling myself as I sent out those invites. God, I was such a sucker. I actually spent 45 minutes crafting the perfect text message to my family. Casual enough that they wouldn't think I was desperate, but specific enough that they'd know this mattered to me. Hey everyone, birthday dinner at Marcello's on Saturday the 18th, 7 p.m. Hope to see you there. Complete with that stupid smiley face emoji that I immediately regretted, but was too proud to follow up with a correction. The responses came in like clockwork. Mom, sounds lovely, sweetheart. Dad, looking forward to it, son. My brother Ryan hit me back with a thumbs up emoji, which, in retrospect, should have been my first red flag. When has Ryan ever been that efficient with communication? The guy takes 3 business days to respond to what's up. Julia was in on it from the beginning, obviously. She had to be. We share a damn calendar app. Every doctor's appointment, every parent-teacher conference, every oil change is color-coded and synced between our phones like we're running some kind of suburban corporation. She knew about my birthday dinner the second I booked the reservation. Hell, she probably got the notification before I did. And Sophie, my sweet 16-year-old daughter who suddenly thinks I'm about as cool as a fanny pack at a music festival? Even she seemed genuinely excited. That sounds really nice, Dad, she said, looking up from her phone for approximately 2.3 seconds, which, for Sophie, basically constitutes a standing ovation. So there I was, riding high on this wave of family togetherness, already picturing the Instagram-worthy moment when they'd bring out the cake and everyone would sing that awkward happy birthday song that somehow gets slower and more off-key with every verse. I even had Julia call ahead to make sure they had those little sparkler candles. You know, the ones that make everything look festive but are actually a fire hazard waiting to happen. The week leading up to my birthday, I was like a kid counting down to Christmas. I caught myself humming in the shower, being extra nice to my coworkers, even letting that jackass Henderson cut in line at the coffee shop, because, hey, life was good. My family was going to be there. We were going to laugh, share stories, and for one night, I was going to be the center of attention in the best possible way. Saturday rolled around, and I spent the morning cleaning the house like Martha Stewart was coming for inspection. Because after dinner, everyone was going to come back here for cake. Real cake. Not some grocery store sheet cake with flowers that look like they were drawn by a colorblind toddler, but actual honest-to-God chocolate cake from that bakery Julia loves. The one where a single cupcake costs more than most people's lunch, but whatever. It was my birthday, and I was feeling generous. By 6 o'clock, I was dressed in my best button-down, the navy one Julia bought me for Christmas that supposedly makes my eyes pop, and checking my watch every 30 seconds like I was expecting the president to show up. The reservation was at 7, which meant we'd all meet there at 7:15 because nobody in my family has ever been on time for anything except their own funerals, and even then I have my doubts. 7:15 came and went. Then 7:30. By 7:45, I was sitting alone at a table for 8, watching the waiter refill my water glass with the kind of pity usually reserved for abandoned puppies. My phone sat on the table like a dead fish, stubbornly silent except for the occasional notification from some app one downloaded and immediately forgot about. That's when my colleagues started showing up. Bless their hearts, they actually remembered. Jim from accounting appeared first, looking slightly confused about why he was the only one there, followed by Sarah from HR with a bottle of wine she probably picked up at the gas station on the way over. Then the Hendersons from next door shuffled in, looking around like they'd walked into the wrong movie theater. "Where is everyone?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair that was supposed to be Mom's. "Running late," I lied, raising my water glass in a mock toast. You know how family is. But I knew, deep down in that part of your gut, where bad news lives before your brain catches up, I already knew they weren't coming. The silence from my phone wasn't traffic delays or last-minute emergencies. It was abandonment with a smile and a thumbs-up emoji. We ordered appetizers. We made small talk about the weather and the latest office drama. Jim told that story about his son's Little League game for the third time this month. And I laughed in all the right places because that's what you do when you're desperately trying to pretend your heart isn't slowly cracking like old paint on a porch railing. By 8:30, the waiter brought out my cake. Those sparkler candles I was so excited about flickered and danced while my makeshift family of coworkers and neighbors sang happy birthday with the enthusiasm of people attending a mandatory corporate seminar. I smiled and made a wish, probably something pathetic like, "Let this night end soon," and blew out the candles to polite applause. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the comfortable silence of people enjoying each other's company, but the awkward, heavy silence of people who suddenly realize they're witnessing something deeply sad and don't know whether to acknowledge it or pretend everything's fine. That's when my phone finally buzzed. You want to know the exact moment I should have seen this train wreck coming? It was 2 weeks after I sent out those birthday invites, sitting in Mom's kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, watching her fuss over a pot roast like she was performing heart surgery. The whole family was there for one of those mandatory weekly dinners that somehow became a thing after Dad's heart scare last year. Because nothing says, "We care about your health," like forcing everyone to gather around a table loaded with enough carbs to fuel a small aircraft. I was actually feeling pretty good about life. My birthday invites had been out in the universe for 14 whole days, and nobody had bailed yet. Sure, nobody had RSVP'd either, but in my family, silence basically means, yeah, I'll be there, unless someone's actively bleeding or getting divorced. I was leaning back in one of Mom's creaky kitchen chairs, the one she refuses to replace because they have character, which is Mom speak for, "I'm too stubborn to admit these things are older than disco." That's when Ryan waltzed in with that shit-eating grin he's been perfecting since middle school. You know the one. Half smugness, half, "I'm about to ruin your day and enjoy every second of it." He was carrying a 12-pack of Corona like he was bringing frankincense to the manger, and Mom immediately lit up like he'd just announced he was running for Pope. "Ryan, honey, you're just in time. I was telling your father about Mrs. Henderson's new fence situation." But Ryan wasn't listening to Mom's riveting saga about property lines and homeowner association drama. No, sir. Ryan had bigger fish to fry. He cracked open a beer, because apparently 5 o'clock starts at noon on Sundays in Ryan's world, and cleared his throat like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. "Actually, Mom, I've got some news," he announced, taking a theatrical swig of his beer. "I'm throwing a party." Now, in any normal family, this would have been met with mild interest and maybe a request for details. But this is the family where Ryan once got a standing ovation for successfully parallel parking. So naturally, Mom practically fell off her chair with excitement. "A party? How wonderful. What's the occasion?" And here it comes, folks. The moment my perfectly planned birthday dinner got nuked from orbit. "Just a grand barbecue party," Ryan said, grinning wider than the Grand Canyon. "Next Saturday, the 18th. Figured it was time to show everyone how it's really done." The 18th. The exact same day as my birthday dinner. The date that had been marked on the family calendar since the moment I sent those invites. The date that everyone, and I mean everyone, knew was my birthday. I felt my stomach drop somewhere around my ankles. "Ryan," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "that's my birthday. We're having dinner at Marcello's, remember?" Ryan looked at me with the kind of innocent confusion that Oscar winners would kill for. "Oh, that's right. Well, it's just a barbecue, man. Lighten up. Lighten up. Lighten up." Like I was some uptight corporate drone getting bent out of shape over a scheduling conflict instead of his older brother who'd just watched his birthday get steamrolled by a guy who once called me crying because he couldn't figure out how to work his coffee maker. "But everyone's already committed to," I started. "Committed?" Ryan laughed, and it wasn't his usual good-natured chuckle. This was different. Sharper. "Come on, bro. It's not like you're getting married again. It's just dinner. Just dinner. Right. Just the dinner I'd been planning for weeks. Just the one night a year when I'd hoped to be the center of attention for reasons other than fixing someone else's problems or mediating someone else's drama. But here's where it gets really good. Instead of backing down or maybe suggesting a different date, Ryan doubled down like he was playing poker with someone else's money. "Besides," he continued, warming up to his theme. I've already put deposits down on everything. The pavilion at Riverside Park, the catering truck, the whole 9 yards. This is going to be epic. Epic. Because apparently, my little brother had decided to turn my birthday into some kind of competition, and he was planning to win by throwing money at it like a drunk lottery winner. Mom, bless her traitorous little heart, was practically vibrating with excitement. Ryan, that sounds absolutely wonderful. How thoughtful of you to plan something so elaborate. Thoughtful. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. Thoughtful. Planning a massive party on your brother's birthday and calling it thoughtful is like setting someone's car on fire and calling it a surprise car wash. I don't know, son. Dad piped up from his recliner, where he'd been pretending to watch golf while obviously listening to every word. Your brother's already got something planned. For a brief, shining moment, I thought Dad was going to stick up for me. Maybe point out that hijacking someone's birthday is generally considered a dick move in most civilized societies. But then Ryan pulled out the big guns. Dad, think about it. When's the last time we had a real family gathering? Something where everyone could just relax, have a few beers, maybe throw a football around? Remember how much fun we used to have at those summer cookouts when we were kids? And just like that, Dad was putty in his hands. Ryan had triggered the magical remember when response that turns grown men into nostalgic marshmallows. Dad's face went all soft and misty-eyed, like he was watching a particularly touching commercial about golden retrievers. Well, Dad said slowly, it would be nice to have everyone together. Everyone together. At Ryan's party. On my birthday. While I sat alone at Marcello's, explaining to the waiter why I needed to cancel 6 of the 8 seats at my reservation. Great, Ryan said, clapping his hands together like he'd just solved world hunger. I'll start making calls. This is going to be the party of the year. Mom was already pulling out her phone, probably to start texting every relative within a 50-mile radius. Should I call Aunt Martha? Oh, and what about the Petersons? They love a good barbecue. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just Ryan being thoughtless or accidentally stepping on my plans. This was strategic. He'd waited exactly 2 weeks after my invites went out. Long enough for everyone to know about my dinner, but not long enough for anyone to feel locked in. He'd positioned his party as the fun alternative to my just dinner. He'd even chosen a venue that could accommodate the entire extended family plus half the neighborhood. I was watching a master class in birthday assassination, and my own family was cheering from the sidelines. Julia, who'd been unusually quiet during this whole exchange, finally spoke up. Well, we'll still come to your dinner, she said to me. But even as the words left her mouth, I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was already calculating the social cost of missing Ryan's epic barbecue to sit through a quiet dinner with my coworkers. Of course we will, she added, but it sounded like someone agreeing to attend a mandatory workplace sensitivity training. So here's how it all went down on the night that was supposed to be my night. Picture this. Me, sitting at Marcello's in that navy button-down that supposedly makes my eyes pop, surrounded by the warm glow of candlelight that I'd specifically requested because I thought it would make for better photos. You know, the kind of photos that show a man celebrating with the people who matter most to him. Instead, I got the kind of lighting that makes you look like you're attending your own wake. The restaurant was perfect, I'll give it that. Marcello had outdone himself with the ambience. Soft jazz playing just loud enough to fill the conversation gaps. The smell of garlic and basil floating through the air like some kind of aromatic hug, and our table positioned right by the window so we could watch the world go by while we celebrated another year of my existence. Too bad the only people watching the world go by were my coworkers and the Hendersons from next door, who kept glancing at their phones like they were expecting a better invitation to materialize. Jim from accounting was doing his best to keep the mood light, regaling us with stories about his weekend golf game that nobody asked for, but everyone politely endured. So there I was, standing over this impossible putt, and I'm thinking to myself, Jim, this is it. This is your moment of glory. And on he went, while I checked my phone for the 100th time, hoping against hope that maybe Julia had sent some kind of explanation for why my own family had collectively decided to ghost me on my birthday. Sarah from HR had brought that gas station wine I mentioned, and God bless her, she was trying to turn it into something celebratory. This is actually quite nice, she lied. taking another sip of what was clearly the liquid equivalent of regret. Very bold. The Hendersons were doing that thing older couples do where they communicate entirely through meaningful looks and subtle head tilts. I caught Mrs. Henderson giving her husband the universal "should we ask about the family?" eyebrow raise, and Mr. Henderson responding with the equally universal "absolutely not" head shake. They'd lived next door to us long enough to know that family drama was like quicksand. The more you struggled with it, the deeper you sank. By 8 o'clock, I'd given up pretending that anyone else was coming. The empty chairs around our table weren't fashionably late. They were just empty. Each vacant seat felt like a personal rejection, a physical manifestation of exactly how much I mattered to the people who were supposed to matter most to me. Julia's chair sat there mocking me with its perfectly arranged place setting. Sophie's spot by the window, where she always liked to sit so she could people watch and pretend she wasn't listening to adult conversation, remained untouched. Even Mom's chair, which I'd positioned at what I thought would be the head of the table, stood as a monument to my own pathetic optimism. The waiter, Giovanni, according to his name tag, had been shooting me sympathetic looks all evening. He was probably in his 20s, with that earnest enthusiasm that only comes from either being new to the service industry or being professionally Italian. Every time he passed our table, I could see him doing the math, counting the empty chairs against the reservation he'd probably written down as birthday party, table of 8. Perhaps the others will arrive soon, he'd suggested, hopefully around 7:30, refilling my water glass for the 4th time. Yeah, I'd replied, any minute now. But minutes turned into an hour, and hope turned into that familiar sting of disappointment that sits right behind your sternum like heartburn. Except antacids can't fix this particular burn. The conversation at our makeshift table had taken on that forced quality that happens when everyone's trying really hard to pretend everything is normal while the elephant in the room gets bigger and starts doing the Macarena. We'd exhausted Jim's golf stories, Sarah's latest binge-watching recommendations, and the Hendersons' detailed analysis of their neighbors' new landscaping choices. We were officially running on conversational fumes. That's when Giovanni approached with the cake. Now, let me tell you about this cake. This wasn't just any cake. This was the chocolate masterpiece from Delacroix Bakery that cost more than most people's car payment. 3 layers of dark chocolate heaven with salted caramel filling and enough ganache to make a grown man weep tears of pure joy. I'd ordered it 2 weeks ago, back when I still believed in things like family loyalty and birthday magic. The baker had even written "Happy Birthday" in elegant script across the top, probably assuming it would be surrounded by smiling faces and heartfelt wishes. Instead, it was surrounded by my accountant, my HR rep, and 2 neighbors who were clearly wondering if it would be rude to check the time on their phones. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes it gives you a weird kind of clarity. As Giovanni set that beautiful cake down in front of me, complete with those sparkler candles that I'd been so excited about, something shifted inside my chest. Not the crushing weight of disappointment I'd been carrying all evening, but something lighter, something almost liberating. The sparklers caught fire with that satisfying hiss and pop that never gets old, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the people who had bothered to show up. These people, Jim with his terrible golf stories, Sarah with her gas station wine, the Hendersons with their meaningful looks, they were here. Not because they had to be, not because of family obligation or social expectation, but because they'd made the choice to celebrate with me. Make a wish, Sarah said, raising her glass of questionable wine. And you know what? I did. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a wish that surprised even me. I didn't wish for my family to suddenly appear with sheepish apologies and elaborate explanations. I didn't wish for Ryan's barbecue to get rained out or for Julia to have a sudden attack of conscience. I wished for the strength to stop caring so goddamn much. The singing started then, that gloriously awkward rendition of Happy Birthday that somehow gets slower and more off-key every year of your life. But this time, it sounded different. Maybe because the voices singing it actually wanted to be there. Maybe because there was something honest about this ragtag group of people who'd shown up just because they liked me, not because DNA or marriage certificates obligated them to. I blew out the candles to genuine applause, and for about 30 seconds, I felt something that might have been contentment. The cake was as amazing as advertised, the company was surprisingly pleasant, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe this birthday wouldn't be a complete disaster. That's when my phone started buzzing against the table like an angry hornet. The phone was doing that thing where it vibrates so aggressively against the table that it starts walking across the surface like some kind of electronic crab having a seizure. Everyone at the table was staring at it. Not because they wanted to be nosy, but because it was impossible to ignore the urgent, panicked buzzing that was cutting through our little birthday bubble like a chainsaw through tissue paper. I picked it up and nearly choked on my bite of $70 chocolate cake. 52 missed calls. 50 all from Julia. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. In the 15 years I've been married to this woman, the most missed calls I've ever had from her was maybe 8. And that was when Sophie broke her arm falling off her bike and needed emergency surgery. 52 missed calls is apocalypse-level communication. This is the kind of phone activity that suggests either the house is on fire, someone's in the hospital, or the zombie apocalypse has finally kicked off and she needs to coordinate our survival strategy. The voicemail notifications were stacked up like pancakes at a Sunday brunch, each little red number taunting me with the urgent desperation of whatever crisis was unfolding in real time while I'd been sitting here eating cake and pretending everything was fine. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, because apparently my face had gone through enough color changes to qualify as a mood ring. "Yeah," I lied, looking at that glowing screen full of digital panic. Just Julia. As if those two words could possibly explain the magnitude of whatever shitstorm was brewing on the other end of those 52 unanswered calls. As if I could casually dismiss the fact that my wife, who was supposed to be at my birthday dinner right now, was apparently having some kind of communication meltdown while attending my brother's rival party. The phone buzzed again. Call 53. I stared at that incoming call, Julia's smiling face filling the screen with a photo from our anniversary dinner last year. Back when she still looked at me like I was someone worth celebrating instead of someone whose birthday you could blow off for better barbecue. Her contact name glowed at the top, Julia Redheart, with that little heart emoji I'd added back when we were still in the phase of our marriage where we put hearts after each other's names instead of just grimly accepting each other's existence. Everyone was watching me now. Not obviously. They were all pretending to be fascinated by their cake or the flickering candle wax. But I could feel their collective attention like heat from a campfire. The weight of expectation, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Are you going to answer it? Here's what I should have done. Any reasonable person would have answered that phone, probably stepped outside to take the call, and found out what earth-shattering emergency required 53 attempts at contact. Any decent husband would have been concerned, maybe even frightened, about what could possibly be so urgent that it required this level of communication assault. But you know what? I wasn't feeling particularly reasonable, or decent, or husband-like. Instead, I looked at that buzzing phone, at Julia's smiling face mocking me from the screen, and I did something that surprised everyone at the table, including myself. I smiled. Not a fake smile, not one of those tight-lipped, socially acceptable expressions you paste on when you're pretending everything's fine. This was something else entirely. This was the kind of smile that comes from deep in your chest, the kind that starts as a tiny spark of recognition and spreads across your face like sunrise breaking over a mountain range. I was smiling because I finally got it. The cosmic joke of it all, the beautiful, terrible irony that was my life. Here I was, sitting at my own birthday dinner, surrounded by people who had actually chosen to be here, and my wife, who had chosen to be somewhere else entirely, was now desperately trying to drag me into whatever drama was unfolding at the party she'd chosen over me. The phone stopped buzzing. Julia's face disappeared from the screen, replaced by the notification that I now had 53 missed calls and what looked like roughly the same number of voicemails. My phone's battery was probably crying from the workout it had just received. "You're not going to answer?" Jim asked, because Jim has never met a boundary he couldn't accidentally cross with his well-meaning concern. "Nope," I said, cutting another piece of cake. This bite tasted even better than the first one, maybe because it came with a side of liberation. It's my birthday. And that was it. That was the moment everything changed, right there between the chocolate ganache and the flickering candlelight. Not with some dramatic declaration or a table-flipping tantrum, but with a simple smile and a piece of cake. The Hendersons exchanged one of their meaningful looks, this one clearly falling into the "well, that's interesting" category. Sarah raised her glass of questionable wine in what might have been approval or confusion. It was hard to tell. Giovanni appeared at my elbow with a fresh napkin, probably thinking I'd lost my mind entirely. But I hadn't lost my mind. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I'd found it. The phone stayed silent for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, long enough for me to finish my cake and start on a second piece, because why the hell not? Then it started buzzing again. Call 54. This time, I didn't even look at the screen. I just smiled wider and took another bite of cake, savoring the salted caramel filling while my phone vibrated itself into electronic exhaustion on the table. Around me, the conversation gradually resumed, my dinner companions apparently deciding that ignoring ringing phones was a perfectly normal birthday tradition. Call 55. Call 56. Each buzz felt like a tiny victory, proof that whatever chaos was unfolding at Ryan's grand barbecue spectacular, it wasn't my problem. Not tonight. Tonight, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, eating overpriced cake with people who had shown up because they wanted to, not because they had to. By the time we reached call 60, even Jim had stopped glancing nervously at my phone. Sarah was telling a surprisingly funny story about her cat's ongoing war with the mailman, and the Hendersons were debating whether to order dessert. Apparently, my chocolate cake had inspired them to embrace the sweet life. I was laughing, actually laughing, at Sarah's cat story when the buzzing finally stopped. My phone screen went dark, and the silence that followed felt rich and full instead of empty and abandoned. This was what peace sounded like. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of obligation to answer every demand for my attention. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious from the beginning. I wasn't the forgotten one tonight. I wasn't the one sitting alone, desperate and abandoned. I was the one who had walked away. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was smiling because I wanted to. You know what's beautiful about modern technology? It lets you experience betrayal in high definition, with crystal clear audio and timestamps that tell you exactly when your life went to hell. I discovered this particular joy the next morning, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that tasted like bitter truth, scrolling through Julia's voicemails like some kind of masochistic archaeologist digging through the ruins of my marriage. The first few messages were what you'd expect from a wife who'd abandoned her husband's birthday dinner. Standard damage control stuff, delivered with that fake cheerful tone that women perfect around the same time they learn to walk in heels without falling on their faces. Hey honey, sorry I missed your call earlier. Ryan's party is going great. Everyone's asking about you. Call me back when you get this. Okay? Love you. Love you. Sure, Julia. Nothing says, I love you, like ditching your spouse's birthday for better brisket and potato salad. But that was just the appetizer. The real feast of dysfunction was still coming. Message number 4 was where things started getting interesting. The fake cheer was beginning to crack around the edges, like cheap paint in a Florida summer. Okay, so listen, we have a tiny situation here. The catering truck broke down about an hour ago, and apparently they can't get another one until tomorrow. People are starting to get hungry, and Ryan's kind of freaking out. Can you maybe call that guy you know who runs the food truck downtown? The one with the tacos? Just call me back, okay? The one with the tacos. She meant Miguel, who runs Wheels of Steel Taco Company and happens to be one of my clients. A guy I'd helped secure a small business administration loan last year when his original truck got totaled by a drunk driver. A guy who trusted me, who counted on me, who probably would have moved heaven and earth to help me out if I'd asked. But I wasn't the one asking, was I? Message 7 was where Julia's desperation really started to shine through. The fake cheer had been completely abandoned in favor of what I like to call crisis management mode. That special blend of panic and entitlement that emerges when someone realizes their poorly planned party is about to become a social disaster. Listen, I know you're probably still at dinner, but this is getting bad. Really bad. Ryan spent all his money on the venue and the decorations, and now we have about 60 people here with no food. Your mom is asking where you are, and I don't know what to tell her. Can you please just call Miguel and see if he can come out here? I'll explain everything later, I promise. I'll explain everything later. That's relationship code for, I'm going to gaslight you into believing this is somehow your fault, but right now I need you to fix my problems. The beautiful thing about listening to someone's descent into panic in real time is that you can actually hear the moment when their true priorities reveal themselves. For Julia, that moment came around message 12, when the polite requests transformed into something closer to demands. Okay, I've been calling you for 2 hours now, and this is getting ridiculous. I get that you're upset about tonight, but Ryan really needs your help. Everyone is looking at me like I should be able to fix this, and I told them you would know what to do. You always know what to do. So please, just pick up the goddamn phone and call Miguel. You always know what to do. Translation: you're really useful when we need something fixed, cleaned up, or paid for. The rest of the time, you're basically furniture that occasionally needs feeding. But wait, it gets better. Message 18 was where Julia completely dropped the pretense of this being about family emergency and revealed what this was really about: social embarrassment. Her voice had that particular quality that happens when someone realizes they're about to become the subject of neighborhood gossip, and not the good kind. The Hendersons just left. The Hendersons. They said they had to get home, but I saw them talking to the Johnsons before they went, and now the Johnsons are looking at their phones and making excuses too. People are starting to leave, and Ryan is just standing there like a deer in headlights. Mom keeps asking why you're not here to help, and I don't know what to say anymore. Please just call me back. Ah, there it is. The truth, finally. This wasn't about emergency or family crisis. This was about Julia realizing that she'd hitched her wagon to the wrong horse, and now she was watching her social status circle the drain in real time. She'd chosen Ryan's party over my birthday, and now Ryan's party was falling apart like a cheap umbrella in a hurricane. The desperation really ramped up around message 25, when Julia's voice took on that edge that happens when someone's trying not to cry, but also trying not to scream. I don't understand why you're not answering. This isn't like you. You always answer when I call. Always. Something must be wrong with your phone, right? Because you wouldn't just ignore me. Not when we need you like this. Ryan's talking about canceling the whole thing, and if he does, everyone's going to know this was a disaster. Everyone's going to know we couldn't even throw a simple barbecue without everything falling apart. We couldn't throw a simple barbecue. Because apparently, even when I wasn't invited to the planning meeting, I was still somehow responsible for the execution. Even when they'd collectively decided my birthday wasn't worth showing up for, I was still expected to be on standby for damage control. By message 30, Julia had moved past desperation and straight into that territory where panic meets rage and produces something truly spectacular. You know what? Fine. Don't answer. But when your daughter asks why her father couldn't be bothered to help save her uncle's party, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her that you were too petty and childish to put aside your hurt feelings for one night. I'll tell her that when your family needed you, you decided to punish everyone by disappearing. My daughter. She was bringing Sophie into this now, weaponizing my relationship with my kid to guilt me into cleaning up their mess. Because nothing says family values like using your teenager as emotional blackmail. But the real masterpiece came in message 47, where Julia's voice cracked just enough to let me know she was either crying or doing a damn good impression of it. I don't know what else to say. I don't know how to fix this. Everyone keeps looking at me like I should have answers, like I should know where you are and why you're not helping. Your brother is about to have a complete meltdown. Your parents are asking if something happened to you. And I'm standing here feeling like the worst wife in the world because I can't even get my own husband to answer his phone. The worst wife in the world. Finally, something we could agree on. After listening to Julia's 47-message symphony of desperation, I did what any reasonable person would do. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, sat my ass down in my favorite chair. The one Julia always complains makes the living room look uncoordinated, but is comfortable enough to die in. And took a long, hard look at the pattern that had been playing out right under my nose for years. See, here's the thing about being the reliable one in the family. You become invisible in the most spectacular way possible. You're simultaneously the most important person in the room and the least interesting. You're the guy everyone calls when the shit hits the fan, but nobody thinks to invite when they're planning something fun. You're basically a human Swiss Army knife. Incredibly useful, completely taken for granted, and stored in a junk drawer until needed. Ryan, on the other hand, has been the golden boy since he learned to walk. And I mean literally since he learned to walk. The kid took his first steps at 9 months old, and you would have thought he'd just cured cancer based on the way mom and dad carried on. Me? I'd been walking for 2 years at that point, but apparently that wasn't newsworthy anymore. First kids break ground. Second kids just follow the path that's already been paved. That pattern has been playing out ever since. When Ryan graduated high school by the skin of his teeth, and I mean barely, the kid had to take summer school just to get his diploma. Mom threw him a party that would have made a lottery winner jealous. When I graduated valedictorian 3 years earlier, we went to Applebee's. Fucking Applebee's. Because apparently academic excellence deserves the same celebration as a Tuesday night dinner special. College was more of the same. Ryan dropped out after 2 semesters, claiming he needed to find himself, which apparently required a 6-month backpacking trip through Europe that Dad happily funded. When he came back with nothing but a questionable tattoo and an even more questionable accent, everyone acted like he'd returned from some Noble Vision quest instead of what it actually was, an expensive quarter-life crisis funded by parental enablement. Meanwhile, I was grinding through 4 years of business school, working 2 part-time jobs to pay for textbooks and ramen noodles, making Dean's List every semester while Ryan was finding himself in Amsterdam coffee shops. Did anyone throw me a party when I graduated magna cum laude? Take a wild guess. Mom made a nice dinner. Dad gave me a firm handshake, and Ryan was too hungover from his welcome home celebration to even show up. The business failures were the real kicker, though. Ryan has started exactly 3 businesses in his adult life, and all 3 have crashed and burned like the Hindenburg having a bad day. First was the food truck venture. Yeah, the irony of Julia wanting me to call Miguel wasn't lost on me, which lasted exactly 6 months before Ryan discovered that running a business requires things like getting up early and keeping track of money and actually showing up consistently. When that folded, who do you think Dad called to help clean up the financial mess? If you guessed the son who actually knows how to balance a checkbook, you'd be right. I spent 3 weekends going through Ryan's disaster of a filing system, trying to sort out vendor payments and tax obligations while Ryan nursed his wounded ego at various happy hours around town. Business number 2 was even better, a landscaping company that Ryan started with his buddy Jake from high school. These 2 geniuses managed to kill more grass than they planted, showed up to jobs with equipment that barely functioned, and somehow convinced themselves they could run a business based entirely on good vibes and working when we feel like it. Spoiler alert, the market wasn't particularly interested in their feelings. When that venture inevitably imploded, guess who got the panicked phone call about small claims court and angry customers? Guess who spent his own money on a lawyer to keep Ryan from getting sued into oblivion? Guess who never got paid back for that lawyer, despite repeated promises that the money was definitely coming next month? And the third business? Jesus Christ, the third business was a masterpiece of delusion. Ryan decided he was going to be a social media influencer. Not for any particular skill or talent, mind you, but because he'd seen some 22-year-old making bank by posting videos of himself eating cereal. Ryan spent $2,000 of Mom and Dad's money on camera equipment and ring lights, set up what he called his content studio in their basement, and proceeded to create exactly 17 videos that collectively garnered about as much attention as a mime at a death metal concert. But here's what really gets me. Through all of this, through every failed venture and harebrained scheme, Mom and Dad never stopped believing in Ryan's potential. Every failure was just a learning experience. Every disaster was proof that he was gaining valuable life skills. Meanwhile, I was building a successful financial planning practice, buying my first house, getting married, having a kid. You know, boring adult stuff that doesn't come with participation trophies. And Julia? Don't even get me started on Julia. When we first started dating, she seemed impressed by my stability, my ambition, my ability to plan more than 5 minutes into the future. She used to joke that I was the adult in her life, the guy who could handle the boring but important stuff while she figured out what she wanted to do with her career. But somewhere along the way, stable became boring, and responsible became predictable. Ryan's chaos started looking like adventure. His spontaneity became charming instead of irresponsible. His complete inability to plan ahead transformed from a character flaw into a refreshing approach to life. I watched it happen in real time over the years. Family gatherings where Julia would light up when Ryan walked in, laughing at his stories about whatever ridiculous situation he'd gotten himself into lately. She'd hang on every word of his latest get-rich-quick scheme while I sat there like a piece of furniture, occasionally offering practical advice that nobody wanted to hear. Sophie fell under his spell too, because of course she did. Uncle Ryan was the fun one, the one who showed up with inappropriate gifts and taught her things I'd specifically asked him not to teach her. Uncle Ryan didn't lecture her about homework or responsibility or thinking about her future. Uncle Ryan just wanted to have a good time, and what 16-year-old doesn't want to be around that energy? So here I was, sitting in my uncoordinated chair, sipping bourbon that cost more than Ryan's last business plan was worth, finally seeing the whole picture with painful clarity. I wasn't the overlooked son, the underappreciated husband, the boring father. I was the foundation they all built their lives on, the stable ground they took for granted while they reached for more exciting things. And they just spent my birthday proving exactly how little that foundation meant to them when push came to shove. You know what they say about revenge being a dish best served cold? Well, they're right. But what they don't tell you is that the best revenge starts with proper documentation. And brother, did I have documentation? After sitting in that chair for 3 hours, nursing bourbon and clarity in equal measure, I did what any self-respecting financial planner would do. I got organized. First stop was my phone. Those 52 missed calls weren't just evidence of Julia's panic. They were timestamps of betrayal, a digital paper trail showing exactly when my family's priorities became crystal clear. But the real treasure was in those voicemails. 47 separate audio files of Julia's voice getting progressively more desperate, each one a perfect little capsule of how quickly family loyalty turns into fix my problems when the chips are down. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, playing each message back and taking notes like I was preparing for the world's most depressing deposition. Message 12. Julia admits she told everyone I would know what to do about their catering disaster. Message 18. She reveals that people are leaving Ryan's party and it's becoming a social embarrassment. Message 25. The first time she tries to guilt me using Sophie. But here's the beautiful thing about people in crisis. They tell the truth. When Julia was panicking about their failed party, she wasn't thinking about how her words might sound later. She was just being honest about what she really thought of me. The reliable fix-it guy who should drop everything to save their asses, even after they'd collectively decided my birthday wasn't worth showing up for. I saved every single voicemail to my computer, backed them up to the cloud, and created a folder on my desktop labeled for later. Because if there's one thing 20 years in financial planning has taught me, it's that documentation is everything. People can lie about what they said, what they meant, what they intended, but digital files don't have selective memory. Next, I dove into the social media rabbit hole, because if you really want to understand how people feel about you, watch what they post when they think you're not paying attention. Facebook was a goldmine of hypocrisy. Julia's page was littered with photos from Ryan's epic barbecue, all posted in real time while I was sitting alone at Marcello's. The timestamps were perfect. 7:23 p.m., Julia posting a selfie with Ryan, both of them grinning like idiots with the caption, "Family fun time." Right around the time she should have been sitting across from me at dinner. 7:45 p.m., a group shot of everyone at the party, including Mom, Dad, and Sophie, all looking like they were having the time of their lives. Posted exactly when she would have been listening to Giovanni sing happy birthday to me and my makeshift family of coworkers. But the real kicker was the 8:30 p.m. post. A picture of the empty catering tables with the caption, "When your food truck breaks down, but family comes first." Red heart hashtag BBQ fail hashtag family time. Posted literally minutes before she started that panicked calling spree, trying to drag me into their mess. Family comes first. I screenshot that one about 6 times, because the irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sophie's Instagram was even better, because teenagers have zero filter and even less awareness of consequences. Her story from that night was a chronological breakdown of my family's betrayal, told in the casual, thoughtless way that only a 16-year-old can manage. First post. Uncle Ryan's party is going to be lit. Fire, 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 with a picture of the party setup. Posted at 6:15 p.m., 45 minutes before my birthday dinner was supposed to start. Second post. Why is the food truck broken though? Loudly crying face at 7:52 p.m. with a picture of the sad, empty serving tables. Third post. Mom's freaking out about dad LOL at 8:35 p.m. No picture, just text. but the timing lined up perfectly with Julia's voicemail meltdown. The beauty of Instagram stories is that they disappear after 24 hours unless you save them. So I saved them. Every single one, screenshot and filed away in my growing collection of digital evidence. But the crown jewel of my documentation came from an unexpected source, Mom's Facebook page. See, Mom might be technologically challenged enough to accidentally post photos of her thumb on a regular basis, but she's also the family historian. Every gathering, every celebration, every moment she thinks deserves preserving gets posted with the kind of detailed captions that would make a museum curator proud. And there it was, posted at 9:15 p.m. on the night of my birthday. A long, rambling post about Ryan's wonderful barbecue party that included this particularly damning paragraph. So proud of my Ryan for organizing such a lovely gathering. Even though we had some food troubles, truck broke down, everyone pulled together to make it special. Sometimes the best memories come from the unexpected moments. Wish our other son could have been here to help out, but I'm sure he had his reasons. Family is everything. Red heart. Wish our other son could have been here to help out. Not, wish he could have been here to celebrate with us. Or, hope he's having a nice birthday. No, she wished I could have been there to help out. To fix their problems. To be useful. And the kicker? I'm sure he had his reasons. Like choosing to attend my own birthday dinner was some kind of petty rebellion instead of, the normal thing a person does on their birthday. I screenshot that post, too, along with all 37 comments from relatives and family friends expressing sympathy for Ryan's tough night and praising his positive attitude in the face of adversity. Not one single comment asking where I was or wishing me happy birthday. Not one person in my extended family even mentioning that it was my birthday. But wait, it gets better. Because Dad, bless his oblivious heart, had left his own comment on Mom's post. Ryan handled it like a champ. Proud of both my boys, even if one couldn't make it tonight. Maybe next time he'll prioritize family over whatever else he had going on. Maybe next time he'll prioritize family. I was prioritizing family, my actual birthday, the one they'd all known about for months. But apparently, my birthday wasn't family enough compared to Ryan's impromptu barbecue disaster. I saved that one too, right next to the voicemails and Instagram stories and Facebook photos. Every piece of evidence carefully filed away, time-stamped and cross-referenced like I was building a legal case. Because maybe I was. The final piece of my documentation came from an unexpected source, my credit card statements. See, I'd paid for that birthday dinner at Marcello's, obviously, but I'd also picked up the tab for my colleagues and the Hendersons. 47 people had been invited to celebrate with me that night, but only 5 had shown up, and I'd ended up buying dinner for everyone because that's what you do when you're the responsible one. $347 for a birthday dinner that my own family couldn't be bothered to attend. I printed out that receipt and added it to my folder, not because I expected anyone to reimburse me, but because it was tangible proof of exactly how much my birthday had been worth to them. I sat back and looked at my laptop screen, at the folder labeled for later that now contained months of screenshots, hours of audio recordings, printed receipts, and social media posts that painted a crystal clear picture of exactly how my family really felt about me. I didn't know exactly how I was going to use this evidence yet, but I knew one thing for certain. When the time came, I'd be ready. Here's the thing about living with people who've fundamentally written you off. They get really fucking comfortable with their disrespect. It's like they've collectively decided that you're too nice, too stable, too goddamn reliable to ever call them on their bullshit. So they just keep piling it on until you're basically a human doormat with a mortgage and a 401k. The weeks after my birthday were a masterclass in gaslighting disguised as normal family life. Julia slipped back into our routine like nothing had happened, making coffee in the mornings and asking about my day like she hadn't spent my birthday frantically trying to drag me into cleaning up someone else's mess. She'd kiss my cheek when she left for work, text me about picking up groceries on the way home, and curl up next to me in bed at night like we were still the same couple we'd been before she'd chosen barbecue over birthday cake. The really impressive part was how she managed to never actually acknowledge what had happened. Not once did she apologize for missing my dinner. Not once did she explain why Ryan's last-minute party had suddenly become more important than the celebration we'd been planning for weeks. She just acted like it hadn't happened. Like my birthday was some minor scheduling conflict that we'd all move past instead of a fundamental betrayal that had shown me exactly where I ranked in her list of priorities. Sophie was even more impressive in her ability to pretend everything was normal. She'd bounce into the kitchen in the mornings, grab her usual breakfast of whatever sugary cereal was currently fashionable, and chat about school drama or friend gossip like she hadn't spent my birthday posting Instagram stories about how much fun Uncle Ryan's party was. The girl could look me straight in the eye and ask me to drive her to the mall, apparently seeing no irony in asking favors from the father she ditched for better entertainment. But the real artists were my parents. Mom called me 3 days after my birthday. Not to apologize, mind you, but to tell me all about Ryan's wonderful party and how sorry she was that the food situation had been such a disaster. She spent 20 minutes detailing every moment of Ryan's barbecue catastrophe, like she was giving me a play-by-play of the Super Bowl, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was describing the event she'd chosen over her own son's birthday celebration. "Your brother handled it so well," she gushed, her voice full of that maternal pride that I hadn't heard directed at me since. Well, I couldn't remember when. Even when everything went wrong, he kept everyone's spirits up. You would have been proud of him. You would have been proud of him. Not, "We missed you," or "We're sorry we couldn't make your dinner." No, she wanted me to be proud of Ryan for gracefully handling the disaster that had ruined the party they'd all chosen over me. Dad was even more direct in his revisionist history when I saw him the following weekend. Because apparently I was still expected to show up for family obligations despite being persona non grata when it came to actual celebrations, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Sorry we missed your dinner, son. But you understand how it is when family needs you." Family needs you. Like Ryan's poorly planned barbecue was somehow more family than his older brother's birthday. Like showing up for me would have been nice, but optional, while rescuing Ryan from his own incompetence was a sacred duty that superseded all other obligations. The beautiful thing was how seamlessly they'd all coordinated this narrative without apparently discussing it. Ryan was the victim of unfortunate circumstances who'd handled adversity with grace. They were the loyal family members who'd rallied around him in his time of need. And I was what? The understanding brother who'd naturally stepped aside so they could focus on the real crisis? But here's what they didn't count on. I was done being understanding. I started small, because the best revenge is always subtle revenge. When Julia asked me to pick up dry cleaning, I forgot. When Sophie needed a ride to her friend's house, I was suddenly too busy with work. When Mom called asking if I could help Dad fix his computer, I developed a mysterious inability to find time in my schedule. "You've been so distant lately," Julia said one night, sitting on the edge of our bed while I read a book that was infinitely more interesting than whatever conversation she wanted to have. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, not looking up from my pages. "Just busy with work." Work became my excuse for everything. Work was why I couldn't attend Ryan's next gathering. Work was why I missed Dad's birthday dinner. Oh, the irony was delicious. Work was why I was suddenly unavailable for all those little favors and fixes that had somehow become my full-time, unpaid job. The thing is, work actually was keeping me busy, but not in the way they thought. I'd started taking on bigger clients, more complex cases, building relationships with people who actually valued what I brought to the table. My practice was growing, my income was increasing, and for the first time in years, I was being appreciated by people who mattered. I landed the Morrison account in June, a tech executive looking to restructure his entire financial portfolio after a successful IPO. The kind of high-stakes, high-reward client that most financial planners dream about. The kind of deal that required late nights, weekend meetings, and the sort of attention to detail that had always made me good at my job, but apparently boring at parties. When I told Julia about the Morrison deal, about how it was going to significantly increase our household income and set us up for early retirement, she nodded absently and said, "That's nice, honey. Hey, Ryan's thinking about starting another business. Maybe you could help him with the financial planning." Maybe you could help him with the financial planning. I'd just landed the biggest client of my career, potentially changing our entire financial future, and her response was to suggest I donate my expertise to her brother-in-law's next inevitable failure. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. They didn't see me as successful. They saw me as useful. My achievements weren't accomplishments to be celebrated. They were resources to be shared with people who mattered more. The Morrison account led to the Pritchard account, which led to the whole Westfield development portfolio. By August, I was handling more money than I'd ever imagined, working with people who treated me like the expert I'd always been but had never been acknowledged as. My calendar was packed with meetings, consultations, and strategy sessions with clients who hung on my every word because they understood that my advice could make or break their financial futures. And my family, they barely noticed. Julia complained that I was working too much. Sophie rolled her eyes when I couldn't drive her somewhere because I had a client call. Mom asked when I was going to take a break from all that business stuff and spend some quality time with the family. Quality time with the family. The same family that had collectively decided my birthday wasn't worth attending. The same people who saw my success as an inconvenience that kept me from being available for their convenience. That's when I started planning Ryan's next lesson in consequences. There's something absolutely poetic about watching someone dig their own grave with a party planning shovel. Ryan's family barbecue too. 0-inch announcement came in early July, delivered with all the fanfare of someone who'd learned absolutely nothing from his previous disaster. This time, he was going big, and I mean Vegas Wedding Chapel Elvis impersonator big. The family group text lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve when Ryan shared his grand vision. Lake Harmony Lodge, one of those rustic chic venues that cost more per day than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Professional catering, a live band, activities for the kids, and enough alcohol to float a small yacht. The biggest family party of the year, he proclaimed, complete with enough exclamation points to power a small city. This is going to be amazing. Julia texted back, because apparently caps lock is the appropriate response to financial irresponsibility disguised as family bonding. Can't wait. Sophie chimed in, probably already planning her Instagram story strategy. So proud of my boy for bringing the family together. Mom added, because watching your adult son throw money he doesn't have at a party he can't afford is apparently grounds for maternal pride in the Johnson family handbook. I sat in my office, looking at this digital circle jerk of enthusiasm on my phone screen, and felt something that was part amusement, part anticipation, in part the cold satisfaction that comes from watching your enemies line up their own dominoes for you to knock down. Because here's what they didn't know. I'd been busy. Really busy. While they were all pretending my birthday betrayal had never happened, I'd been building something beautiful. A network of contacts, clients, and professional relationships that extended far beyond my little corner of the financial planning world. Miguel from Wheels of Steel Taco Company? Yeah, we'd stayed in touch. Turns out, helping a guy save his business creates the kind of loyalty that money can't buy. And Miguel had friends, other food truck operators, catering companies, event planners, people who talk to each other, who share information, who remember favors. The Morrison account had connected me with tech executives who knew marketing directors, who worked with social media managers, who understood exactly how information flows in the digital age. The Pritchard deal had introduced me to lawyers who knew journalists who understood the art of strategic communication. And the Westfield development portfolio? Well, that had given me access to the kind of people who could make or break someone's reputation with a few well-placed phone calls. Ryan had scheduled his epic family gathering for Saturday, August 15th, a full year and 3 weeks after he'd hijacked my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd spent an entire year basking in the glory of his first party disaster, retelling the story of how he'd pulled everyone together and made the best of a bad situation, turning his colossal failure into some kind of heroic family legend. But this time was going to be different. This time I was ready. I started my campaign on Monday morning, exactly 5 days before Ryan's big event. Not with some dramatic confrontation or angry outburst. That's amateur hour stuff. No. I started with a simple email to my network. Professional, calm, matter of fact. The subject line read, sharing some context on family dynamics. The body was a masterpiece of understated devastation. I didn't rant or rave or sound bitter. I simply shared the facts, supported by all that beautiful documentation I'd been collecting. Screenshots of Julia's social media posts from my birthday, timestamped to show exactly when she'd been having fun at Ryan's party instead of attending my dinner. Audio files of her voicemails, demonstrating the panic and desperation when Ryan's first party fell apart and they needed me to fix it. But the real kicker was Mom's Facebook post, the one where she'd wished I could have been there to help out. Instead of celebrating my own birthday, I'd annotated it like a legal document, highlighting the key phrases that revealed exactly how my family saw me, not as someone to celebrate, but as someone to use. I sent this package to select people in my professional and personal network. Not everyone. That would have been overkill. Just the right people. Clients who'd become friends. Colleagues who knew me well enough to understand the context. Neighbors who'd been at my birthday dinner and had seen the empty chairs with their own eyes. The beautiful thing about truth is that it spreads itself. You don't need to push it or promote it or convince people to believe it. You just need to present it clearly, and people draw their own conclusions. By Wednesday, the ripple effects were starting. The Hendersons mentioned to the Petersons how they'd witnessed my family's no-show at my birthday. The Petersons told the Johnsons, who told the Millers, who happened to know several people who'd been invited to Ryan's big lakeside extravaganza. Miguel, bless his entrepreneurial heart, shared the story with his network of food service providers, not out of malice, but out of genuine disbelief that anyone would treat family that way. Word spread through the catering community like wildfire. The Johnson family were the kind of people who'd abandon their own son's birthday celebration, then panic call him to fix their problems when their own event fell apart. By Thursday, my story had reached the social media managers and marketing directors in my professional network. These people understood narrative, understood how perception shapes reality in the digital age. They didn't do anything dramatic. They just shared the story with their own networks, framing it as an example of how some families prioritize image over substance. But the masterstroke came Friday morning, 18 hours before Ryan's party was scheduled to begin. I'd saved the best for last, a carefully curated package of evidence sent to every single person who'd been invited to Ryan's lakeside celebration. Not just my family's evidence, but context. Screenshots showing the timeline of events from my birthday. Audio clips of Julia's increasingly desperate voicemails. Social media posts proving that they'd all chosen Ryan's first party over my birthday, then expected me to bail them out when it failed. The message was simple. Thought you should know what kind of people you're celebrating with this weekend. I sent it at 8:47 a.m. on Friday, just as people were checking their phones with their morning coffee, planning their weekend, getting excited about Ryan's big party. Then I sat back and waited for the consequences to unfold. You know what they say about history repeating itself? Sometimes it doesn't just repeat. Sometimes it comes back with interest, compound annually, and delivers a return on investment that would make Warren Buffett weep with joy. By 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon, exactly 24 hours after I'd sent my truth bombs into the digital stratosphere, my phone started buzzing with the familiar rhythm of panic that I'd heard once before, almost exactly 1 year ago. Except this time, I was ready for it. This time, I was sitting in my backyard with a cold beer, my laptop open to the folder labeled Mission Accomplished, watching the beautiful chaos unfold in real time through social media notifications and increasingly frantic family communications. The first sign that my plan was working came from an unexpected source, the Lake Harmony Lodge's Instagram account. They'd posted a cheerful, "Welcome to the Johnson family celebration" message at noon, complete with photos of their beautifully decorated pavilion and professionally arranged buffet tables. By 2:30 p.m., they'd quietly deleted the post. By 3:15 p.m., they'd posted a generic, "Beautiful Saturday at the Lodge" message with no mention of any specific event. That's when my phone started its familiar dance of desperation. Julia, call number 1. I watched her name light up the screen, that same smiling photo from our anniversary dinner, and took a long, satisfying sip of my beer. Ryan, call number 2. Then 3. Then 4. Mom, calls 5 through 8, because apparently panic makes her forget that leaving 4 voicemails in a row isn't actually more effective than leaving 1. The beautiful thing about being prepared for chaos is that you can actually enjoy it. I'd learned my lesson from last year's birthday disaster. This time, I wasn't going to sit there wondering what was happening. This time, I had front row seats to the whole spectacular collapse, courtesy of the digital age and my carefully cultivated network of information sources. Miguel texted me at 3:22 p.m. "Dude, what the hell happened to your brother's party? Just got a call canceling the backup catering I wasn't even officially hired for. Something about changed circumstances. Sarah from my office, remember Sarah with the gas station wine, sent me a screenshot at 3:35 p.m. Someone in her neighborhood Facebook group had posted asking if anyone knew the real story about the Johnson family drama, because apparently the gossip had reached suburban social media faster than a wildfire in drought season. But the real entertainment came from watching Ryan's social media accounts. The man had been posting updates about his epic family gathering all week, building anticipation like he was promoting a major concert. Photos of the venue scouting, videos of him explaining his vision for the perfect family celebration, countdown posts with inspirational quotes about the importance of bringing people together. At 3:47 p.m., he posted a single line. Due to unforeseen circumstances, today's event has been postponed. Thanks for understanding. Unforeseen circumstances, like the consequences of your own actions, are some kind of natural disaster that nobody could have predicted. The comments on that post were a masterclass in social media schadenfreude. People asking what happened, expressing concern, offering help, but also, increasingly, people who'd clearly heard the real story and were asking pointed questions about family loyalty and priorities. Hope everything's okay. Though I heard there was some drama about birthdays, posted someone named Jennifer who I didn't recognize, but who apparently had excellent sources. Unforeseen or just consequences. Posted Dave Patterson, one of my clients who'd obviously received my Friday morning information package and decided he had some thoughts to share. My phone had reached 37 missed calls by 4 p.m., distributed across all the usual suspects. Julia was leading the pack with 14 attempts, followed by Ryan with 11, Mom with 8, and even Dad with 4, which was remarkable, considering Dad usually communicates exclusively through grunts and disappointed looks. That's when Sophie finally joined the party. Call number 38 came from my daughter, and for just a moment, I felt a tiny pang of something that might have been guilt. Sophie was 16, caught in the middle of adult dysfunction, probably confused and embarrassed by whatever social media nightmare was unfolding around her friends. But then I remembered her Instagram story from my birthday. Uncle Ryan's party is going to be lit. Fire, 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 posted while I was sitting alone at Marcello's, waiting for family that never showed. Call 38 went unanswered, just like the 37 before it. The voicemails started piling up like snow in a blizzard, each one a little more desperate, a little more revealing than the last. I didn't listen to them immediately. Part of the joy was letting them accumulate, letting the panic build to a crescendo before I finally tuned in to hear what they had to say. But Julia's texts were immediate and increasingly frantic. Call me right now. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. People are leaving, everyone's asking questions. What did you do? This is our family you're destroying. Our family. Our family. The same family that had collectively decided my birthday wasn't worth showing up for, but now suddenly belonged to both of us when it was falling apart. By 5 p.m., my phone showed 51 missed calls, and I decided it was time for the grand finale. I poured myself another beer, opened my laptop, and started listening to the voicemails in chronological order, like a connoisseur sampling a fine wine that had been aging to perfection. Julia's first message was all fake calm and damage control. Hey honey, there's been some kind of misunderstanding about Ryan's party. Can you call me back so we can clear this up? Some people are saying they received some kind of email, and I'm sure it's all just a big mix-up. A big mix-up. Like accidentally sending documented evidence of their betrayal was some kind of technical glitch instead of a deliberate choice. Ryan's messages were more direct. What the fuck, man? What the fuck did you do? People are canceling. The caterer wants to know if we're still having the party, and Mom's crying. Call me back. Mom's crying. Well, that was new. In all my years of being the reliable, overlooked, taken for granted son, I'd never managed to make Mom cry. But apparently, facing the consequences of treating me like garbage was emotionally challenging for her. Dad's voicemails were the most interesting because Dad doesn't usually do emotional expression beyond mild disappointment and occasional pride in Ryan's latest failure. But desperation had apparently unlocked a whole new range of paternal communication. Son, I don't know what's going on, but your mother is beside herself. People are calling asking about some kind of family drama, and Ryan's party is falling apart. I know we haven't always. Look, Can you just call us back? Please. Please. When was the last time my father had said please to me about anything? But the real masterpiece came in voicemail 43, when Julia finally dropped all pretense and revealed exactly what this was really about. You want to destroy our family because you're upset about a birthday party? A birthday party? You're willing to humiliate us in front of everyone we know because we missed one dinner? This is insane. This is cruel. And this isn't the man I married. The man I married was better than this. He was mature enough to handle disappointment without burning everything down out of spite. The man she married. The reliable fixer, the understanding doormat. The guy who would swallow his hurt feelings and show up anyway when they needed something. The man who would prioritize their comfort over his own dignity. Who would smile and pretend everything was fine while they treated him like he didn't matter. She was right. The man she married would never have done this. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who understood his own worth and wasn't afraid to defend it. I finished my second beer, closed my laptop, and walked into my kitchen to cut myself a piece of leftover birthday cake. Yes, I still had some in the freezer from last year, because apparently I'm sentimental about my own disasters. As I sat at my kitchen table, eating cake that was exactly 1 year old, my phone buzzed one more time. Call number 52. Julia again. I looked at that familiar photo, that smiling face that had once represented love and partnership and shared dreams, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just a kind of peaceful emptiness, like the quiet after a storm has passed and washed everything clean. I turned off the phone and set it aside. Outside my window, the sun was setting on what should have been Ryan's epic family gathering. The party that was supposed to prove he could bring everyone together, the celebration that had cost him thousands of dollars and months of planning. Instead, it was just another Saturday evening, quiet and mine. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the forgotten one, the overlooked son, the reliable husband who could be counted on to fix everyone else's problems while his own needs went unmet. I wasn't the foundation everyone else built their lives on while taking me completely for granted. I was the man who had walked away, the man who had chosen his own dignity over their convenience, the man who had smiled while they choked on the consequences of their own choices. And that smile, it wasn't for them anymore. It was mine.